Ladies and gentlemen, if you could assume any state of consciousness right now, wealth, love, health, freedom, and maintain it for just 3 days without wavering, would you do it? Most would say yes, but here's the paradox. You cannot maintain that state while wanting it. You can only maintain it by already being it. This is the secret hidden in plain sight throughout every scripture, every mystical text, every transformative teaching. The law doesn't respond to desire. It responds only to identity. And tonight, I'm going to show you how to become what you seek before a single outer condition changes, and why that act alone compels reality to reshape itself around you. You've tried everything. You visualized until your mind HD. You've affirmed until the words lost all meaning. You've scripted, you've meditated, you've acted as if, and yet, nothing. Or worse, fleeting glimpses of success that dissolve the moment you grasp for them. You're exhausted. You're doubting. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, "Maybe this doesn't work for me." But that voice is a lie. The law works with absolute impartiality. It worked when you imagined your failure, and it's working now as you imagine your lack. The law has never failed you. You've simply been using it unconsciously, creating the very conditions you're trying to escape. What you need now isn't another technique. What you need is a complete reframe of what creation actually is. You've been taught that imagination is a tool you use to change the future. But imagination is God Himself, and the future is a fiction, a pale shadow cast by the intensity of your present state of consciousness. This teaching will shatter 3 pervasive myths that have kept you locked in spiritual poverty. The first myth is this: I need to do something to make this work. But the truth is, you need to stop doing and start being. The law responds to states of consciousness, not actions. The second myth: my desire is out there in time waiting to happen. But the truth is, your desire exists now in consciousness. You're simply not occupying the state where it's visible. The third myth: if I feel the wish fulfilled, I'm lying to myself. But the truth is, the wish fulfilled is the truth. Your current circumstances are the lie shadows cast by an outdated assumption you've unknowingly sustained. By the end of this teaching, you'll understand exactly why nothing has worked, and more importantly, you'll know the single shift in consciousness that makes the law bend to your command. You won't need to try anymore. You'll simply know, and that knowing will set you free. Let me tell you a story. It's a story I know intimately because I witnessed it firsthand, and it contains within it the entire operation of this law. In the spring of 1943, a young man was drafted into the army and stationed at a large military camp in Louisiana. The war was raging. Men were being shipped overseas daily, and this soldier, though patriotic and willing to serve, was intensely eager to get out of the army, but only in an entirely honorable way. He didn't want to desert. He didn't want to fake an illness. He wanted a legitimate, honorable discharge. Now, based on Army regulations at that time, the only way to receive such a discharge was to apply for one through the proper channels. The application required the approval of his commanding officer, and that decision was final. There was no appeal, no higher authority. He could petition. The commanding officer's word was law, so the soldier, following all necessary procedures, applied for his discharge. He filled out the forms, submitted them, and waited. Within 4 hours, 4 hours, his application was returned. Stamped across the top in red ink was one word: disapproved. No explanation, no discussion, just disapproved. Now most men in his position would have accepted this as final. They would have resigned themselves to their fate, convinced that external circumstances had trapped them, that the will of another man, this commanding officer, had power over their destiny. But this soldier had been studying the law of assumption. He knew something that most men do not know. He knew that his consciousness was the only reality. He knew that his particular state of consciousness determined every event he would encounter. He knew that the commanding officer, the army regulations, the war itself, all of it, was simply the outpouring of his own inner assumptions, and so convinced that he could not appeal this decision to any higher human authority, he turned within to his own consciousness. He turned to the only authority that matters, the I am within him. That night, in the interval between getting into bed and falling asleep, he began to use the law consciously. He didn't visualize being discharged. He didn't hope for it. He didn't plead with God or the universe or some external force. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He assumed the consciousness of already being honorably discharged. He felt himself lying in his own bed at home, a civilian once more. He felt the relief, the satisfaction, naturalness of being free. He didn't think about the discharge. He thought from the discharge. He inhabited that state as though it were already true, because in consciousness it was true. Night after night he did this, as his body lay on that narrow army cot in Louisiana. His consciousness was home. He would close his eyes, induce a state of physical relaxation, and then shift his entire sense of identity. He stopped being a soldier, hoping for discharge. He became a civilian, reflecting on his honorable service completed. He didn't imagine the future. He imagined the present, but a present that matched his desire. And he fell asleep in that feeling every single night. He didn't waver. He didn't doubt. He didn't check the outer world for confirmation. He simply persisted in the assumption that he was already free. Now, what happened? Within a matter of weeks, new orders came through channels no one had anticipated. The very commanding officer who had denied his application suddenly approved a discharge for reasons that seemed to have nothing to do with the soldier himself. A bureaucratic shuffle. They called it a change in policy. But the soldier knew the truth. There had been no change in policy. There had been a change in consciousness. His consciousness and that inner change had rearranged the entire outer world to conform to his assumption. The commanding officer was never the authority. The soldier's own I am was the authority. The commanding officer was simply a figure in the dream, responding to the dreamer's assumption. Do you see what happened here? This soldier recognized something that most people never recognize, that external authority is always your own assumption projected outward. You've been taught to believe that other people have power over you. Your boss, your spouse, the government, the economy, your parents, your circumstances. You've been taught that these external forces determine your fate. But this is the grand illusion. There is no external force. There is only consciousness, and your consciousness is the operant power. When this soldier changed his state of consciousness, when he stopped thinking of freedom and started thinking from freedom, the entire structure of his external world had to rearrange itself. It had no choice. The law doesn't respond to begging. It doesn't respond to hoping. It responds only to assumption. And an assumption, if persisted in, will harden into fact. Now, let me tell you another story. This one even more personal to me. Many years ago, I found myself in New York during one of the coldest winters I can remember. It was November, and I was longing, deeply longing to spend Christmas in Barbados with my family. I could feel the pull of home, the warmth of the island, the faces of my loved ones gathered together. But there was one significant problem. I had no money. For passage, a steamship ticket to Barbados cost more than I could afford, and there seemed to be no way to get there. I mentioned this desire to my teacher, a man named Abdullah. Abdullah was a mystic, a man who understood consciousness in ways most people never do. And when I told him of my desire to be in Barbados for Christmas, he looked at me with absolute certainty and said, "Something I'll never forget." He said, "If you will imagine yourself to be in Barbados, thinking and viewing the world from that state of consciousness instead of thinking of Barbados, you will spend the winter there. You must not concern to yourself with the ways and means of getting there, for the state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, if occupied by your imagination, will devise the means best suited to realize itself." I must admit, I was skeptical, not of the principle. I knew the law was true, but of my ability to sustain such an assumption in the face of obvious lack. I had no ticket. I had no money. I had no invitation. How could I possibly assume I was in Barbados when I was clearly in New York? But Abdullah was insistent. He said, "You must imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The world which we describe from observation must be as we describe it relative to ourselves. Your imagination connects you with the state desired, but you must use imagination masterfully, not as an onlooker thinking of the end, but as a partaker thinking from the end. You must actually be there in imagination." So that night I did as he instructed. I lay down in my bed in New York, but I refused to accept that location as my reality. Instead, I fixed my thoughts beyond the limits of my senses, beyond that cold room and that narrow bed, and I imagined myself in my father's house, in Barbados. I didn't imagine the journey. I didn't visualize the steamship. I didn't picture myself arriving. I simply assumed I was already there. I felt the warm trade winds on my. I heard the familiar sounds of home. I saw the faces of my family around me. I made it so real in my imagination that my senses began to respond as though it were physically true. And then in that feeling, I fell asleep. Night after night, I did this. I didn't waver. I didn't question. I didn't check my bank account or calculate whether it was possible. I simply persisted in occupying the state of already being in Barbados. And here's what happened. Within a month, 1 month, I received a letter from my brother. In the letter, he wrote that he had been feeling a strong, almost irresistible desire to have the entire family together for Christmas. He couldn't explain it, he just felt it. And enclosed with the letter was a steamship ticket to Barbados. He had purchased it for me. He had sent it of his own accord, moved by an impulse he couldn't quite understand. But I understood. I had, by the intensity of my imagination and feeling, influenced my brother into desiring my presence. I had thought from the end, from the feeling of my wish fulfilled, and that inner state had become the cause of everything that appeared as outer circumstances. I sailed to Barbados 2 days after receiving that letter, and I spent a wonderful winter there. But more than the trip itself, this experience taught me something profound. It taught me that I could no longer excuse myself by placing blame on the world of external things. My good and my evil had no dependency, except from myself. Everything depended on the state from which I viewed the world. When I viewed it from lack, from wanting, from New York wishing I were in Barbados, I remained stuck. But the moment I shifted my state, the moment I viewed the world from Barbados, reality had no choice but to conform. The bridge of incidents built itself. My brother's impulse, the ticket, the timing, all of it arranged itself perfectly because my assumption demanded it. This is what I mean when I say you must think from the end, not of the end. Thinking of the end keeps you in separation. You're here and your desire is there, and you're trying to build a bridge between the two. But thinking from the end collapses that separation entirely. You simply claim the end as your present reality in consciousness, and the means arrange themselves. You don't have to figure out how. You don't have to manipulate circumstances. You don't have to force anything. You simply assume, and the assumption, if persisted in, hardens into fact. Now let me share one more story with you, because this one illustrates another aspect of the law that people often misunderstand. A costume designer once came to me deeply distressed. She worked for a prominent theatrical producer, and she was convinced that this man was treating her unjustly. She told me he constantly criticized her work, rejected her best designs, and was often deliberately rude and unfair to her. She felt victimized. She felt powerless, and she wanted to know what she could do to change his behavior. I listened to her story, and then I said something that surprised her. I said, "If you find this man rude and unfair, it's a sure sign that you yourself are wanting, that it's not the producer, but yourself who is in need of a new attitude." She was taken aback. She said, "But you don't understand. He really is this way. I've seen it. Everyone sees it," I said. "Others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. Tell me, do you have conversations with this man in your mind?" She hesitated, and then she admitted it. She said, "Every morning on my way to the theater, I tell him exactly what I think of him. I have these long arguments with him in my head. I tell him off in ways I would never dare to in person." And I said, "There it is. You're creating his behavior toward you through your inner conversations. He's not the problem. Your concept of him is the problem. He's simply reflecting back to you what you're inwardly assuming about him." She was resistant at first, as most people are when they realize they've been creating their own suffering. She wanted him to be the villain so she could remain the victim. But I explained to her that the law of assumption is completely impersonal. It doesn't care who's right or wrong. It simply responds to your state of consciousness. If you assume a person is cruel, they will be cruel to you. If you assume they're kind, they will be kind. Not because you're controlling them, but because your assumption determines what you perceive and experience. I told her that the only way to change his behavior was to change her inner conversations. I told her to stop the mental arguments and instead imagine conversations where he praised her work, where he was supportive and kind. She agreed to try. Every morning on her commute, instead of rehearsing arguments, she imagined him congratulating her on her designs. She heard him in her mind, saying, "This is excellent work. Thank you. I appreciate your talent." She imagined feeling gratitude toward him, and him expressing appreciation toward her. She did this persistently, day after day. And within a very short time, days, not weeks, his entire demeanor toward her changed. He became exactly what she had been imagining. He praised her work. He became supportive. He stopped criticizing. And she realized, to her amazement, that he had never been the problem. Her own inner conversations had been dictating his behavior all along. This is one of the most liberating truths you'll ever discover. You are never a victim of another person. You're only ever a victim of your own unexamined assumptions. The world is a mirror. Every person in your life is simply reflecting back to you what you inwardly believe about them. Your boss, your spouse, your children, your enemies, they're all playing roles in the drama of your own consciousness. And the moment you change your inner conversation, their behavior must change. This doesn't mean you're controlling them. It means you're changing the state from which you perceive them. And perception is reality. So now let's go deeper. Let's talk about why nothing has worked for you up until now. I want to diagnose the root problem, because once you see it clearly, the solution becomes obvious. The reason your techniques have failed, your visualizations, your affirmations, your scripting, all of it is because you've been using them as tools to get somewhere. You've been using them to change your future. You've been using them to move from here to there. But the law doesn't respond to movement. It responds only to arrival. You cannot climb to a state of consciousness. You can only choose it. You can only occupy, and you can only refuse to leave it. When you visualize your desire and feel excited about it, what are you actually doing? You're confirming that you don't have it yet. The very act of reaching for it affirms its absence. When you affirm, "I am wealthy," over and over while feeling poor, what are you doing? You're creating resistance. The affirmation and the feeling are in opposition, and the feeling always wins. Feeling is the secret, not words, not images. Feeling. And the feeling must be the feeling of already having, not the feeling of wanting to have. Do you see the difference? Wanting is a state of lack. Having is a state of fulfillment. And the law responds only to the state you occupy, not the state you wish to occupy. This is why effort creates resistance. Effort implies absence. If you're trying very hard to manifest something, you're simultaneously affirming that it's not here yet. You're affirming that it's difficult, that it requires struggle, that it's separate from you. But creation is finished. Everything already exists. Wealth exists. Love exists. Health exists. Freedom exists not in some future time or distant place now. All possible states of consciousness exist now in the infinite I am. Your job is not to create anything. Your job is simply to select the state you wish to occupy and refuse to leave it. That's all. There's no effort required. There's only choice and persistence in that choice. Think of it this way. Imagine you're standing in a vast library, and every book on every shelf represents a different state of consciousness. One book is wealth, one book is poverty, one is love, one is loneliness, one is health, one is sickness. You don't have to write new books. They're all already there. You simply have to choose which book to read. And whichever book you commit to reading, whichever story you immerse yourself in, becomes your lived experience. That's creation. Not making something new, but selecting from what already is. And you select by assuming by claiming a state as yours, refusing to accept any other state as real. So when you ask, when will my desire manifest? You're reading the wrong book. You're in the story of waiting, of not yet, of someday. But there is no someday in consciousness. There is only now. The future you're waiting for doesn't exist. It never will. The only moment that exists is this one. And in this moment, every possible state is available to you. Your wealth is available now. Your freedom is available now, not in time but in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. The three-dimensional world is simply the shadow cast by consciousness. Change the consciousness and the shadow must change. Let me explain what I mean. By consciousness is the only reality because this is the foundation of everything. When I say consciousness, I'm not talking about awareness in the abstract. I'm talking about your sense of I am. I'm talking about your feeling of being. Right now, you're conscious of being something. Maybe you're conscious of being worried. Maybe you're conscious of being hopeful. Maybe you're conscious of being stuck. Whatever you're conscious of being, that is what you are. And what you are determines what you see and experience. You can't experience anything other than what you are. A poor man doesn't experience wealth because he is not in the state of wealth, he's in the state of poverty. A sick man doesn't experience health because he is not in the state of health, he's in the state of sickness. The state you occupy is everything. And here's the key. There is nothing outside of consciousness. Nothing. The entire world, every circumstance, every event, every person, every object is a projection of states of consciousness. You've been trying to change effects while leaving the cause untouched. You've been trying to rearrange the shadows while keeping the light source fixed. But it doesn't work that way. You must change the cause. And the cause is always consciousness. Always. When you change your state of consciousness, the entire world must rearrange itself to match. It has no choice. The outer world is completely subject to the inner world. The Bible tells us, "In my Father's house are many mansions." This is one of the most misunderstood verses in Scripture. People think it's talking about literal houses in some heavenly realm, but it's not. It's talking about states of consciousness. The Father is, I am your awareness of being. The house is your consciousness, and the many mansions are the infinite states available within that consciousness. Wealth is a mansion. Poverty is a mansion. Health is a mansion. Sickness is a mansion. Love is a mansion. Loneliness is a mansion. Every possible experience exists now as a state of consciousness, a mansion you can enter. You don't create these mansions. They already exist. You simply choose which one to occupy. And how do you choose? By assumption, by claiming a state as your own and persisting in it until it becomes natural. Right now, you're occupying a mansion. Maybe it's the mansion of lack. Maybe it's the mansion of struggle. Maybe it's the mansion of unworthiness. You've been living in that mansion so long that it feels like the only mansion that exists, but it's not. Right next to it is the mansion of abundance, the mansion of ease, the mansion of worthiness. Same house, same father, different mansion, different state. And you can move from one to the other in an instant, simply by assuming you're in the new mansion and refusing to return to the old one. This is what it means to think from the end instead of thinking of the end. When you think of the end, you're standing in one mansion looking at another. You're in poverty looking at wealth. You're in loneliness looking at love. You're in sickness looking at health. And as long as you're looking at it, you're separated from it. You're affirming it's over there and you're over here. But when you think from the end, you move mansions. You stop looking at wealth from poverty. You look at poverty from wealth. You stop looking at love from loneliness. You look at loneliness from love. You stop looking at health from sickness. You look at sickness from health. You change your position entirely. And from that new position, everything looks different. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're standing at the base of a mountain, looking up at the peak. From that position, the peak looks distant, difficult, perhaps, impossible to reach. But now, imagine you're suddenly transported to the peak. You're standing at the top, looking down at where you were. From this new position, the valley looks distant. The difficulty is behind you. You're not trying to get to the peak anymore because you're already there. That's the difference between thinking of and thinking from. Thinking of is standing at the base. Thinking from is standing at the peak. And here's the secret. You don't have to physically climb a mountain. You simply have to assume you're at the peak in consciousness. And consciousness being the only reality will rearrange the physical world to match. So the question is, how do you think from the end? How do you assume you're at the peak when your senses tell you you're at the base? This is where feeling comes in. Feeling is the secret, not emotion feeling. There's a difference. Emotion is temporary, reactive, unstable. Feeling is deeper. It's the tone of your consciousness, the atmosphere of your being. When I say assume the feeling of the wish, fulfilled, I don't mean get excited or happy or enthusiastic, although those emotions may arise naturally. I mean assume the quiet, natural feeling tone of already being the person who has what you desire. Let me make this practical. If you desire wealth, what's the feeling tone of a wealthy person? It's not excitement. Excitement implies newness, surprise, lack. A truly wealthy person doesn't get excited about money. They're natural with it, they expect it, they take it for granted. So if you want to assume the state of wealth, you must cultivate that same naturalness. You must feel about money the way a wealthy person feels about it as something that's always there, always flowing, nothing to worry about. That's the feeling, not joy or excitement or relief, but naturalness. And you cultivate this feeling by asking yourself one question: how would I feel if my desire were already fulfilled? Not how would I act, not what would I do, but how would I feel? And then you rest in that feeling. This is easier to do in certain states of mind. The threshold between waking and sleeping is the most powerful time. Abdullah taught me this. He said, "The state from which you fall asleep is the state that impresses itself most deeply on your subconscious mind. Your subconscious, which is the creative power within you, accepts whatever you impress upon it. And it's most receptive when your conscious mind is drowsy, relaxed, and your body is still. So the practice is this: lie down as you would to sleep. Relax your body completely. Induce a kind of drowsy numbness as though you've drunk hemlock. As Keats wrote, in this state, your conscious mind loosens its grip and your subconscious becomes highly impressionable. Now, in this state, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Don't visualize the future. Don't imagine the journey. Simply assume you're already the person you wish to be. If you desire wealth, feel wealthy. If you desire love, feel loved. If you desire health, feel healthy. Make it so real in your imagination that your senses begin to respond. You might feel relief. You might feel satisfaction. You might feel peace. Whatever you feel, let it be the feeling of having, not wanting. And then in that feeling, fall asleep. Don't force it. Don't struggle. Just gently, naturally let yourself drift off while maintaining that feeling tone. This is the art of impressing the subconscious. This is how you plant the seed that will grow into your physical experience. But here's what most people misunderstand. They do this once and expect immediate results. And when results don't come the next day, they say, "See, it doesn't work." But that's not how the law operates. An assumption must be persisted in until it hardens into fact. How long does that take? It depends on the naturalness of the assumption. If you're assuming something that feels completely natural to you, something you can easily believe about yourself, it will externalize quickly. But if you're assuming something that feels unnatural, something your conscious mind resists, it will take longer. Not because the law is weak, but because you're not fully committed to the assumption. You're wavering. You're doubting. You're checking the outer world for confirmation instead of remaining faithful to the inner assumption. This is why I say the law responds to persistence, not effort, but persistence. Persistence means you assume the state and refuse to leave it regardless of what your senses show you. Your bank account says you're poor. You remain in the state of wealth. Your body says you're sick. You remain in the state of health. Your relationships say you're unloved. You remain in the state of being loved. You don't argue with the outer world. You don't try to change it directly. You simply persist in occupying the state that corresponds to your desire. And the outer world must eventually conform. It has no choice. Consciousness is cause. The three-dimensional world is effect, and effect cannot argue with cause. Now, let me tell you about something called revision, because this is one of the most powerful techniques I've ever taught, and yet it's one of the least understood. Revision is the act of rewriting the past in your imagination. Most people believe the past is fixed, unchangeable, a done deal. But that's not true. The past exists only as memory. In your consciousness, and memory is just another state of consciousness. So if you can change the memory, you change the past. And if you change the past, you change its fruit in the present and future. Here's how it works. Suppose something disappointing happened to you today. You had an argument. You received bad news. You failed at something. You experienced rejection. Tonight, before you fall asleep, don't just accept that event as final. Revise, aid it. Replay it in your imagination, but change it to conform to what you wish had happened. If you had an argument, imagine the conversation going smoothly. Hear the other person responding with kindness. Feel the resolution. If you received bad news in a letter, rewrite the letter mentally. Read the good news you wish you had received. If you failed, imagine succeeding. Make the revision so vivid that it feels more real than what actually happened. Why does this work? Because the event that happened in the outer world is just a shadow. The real event, the causal event, is the state of consciousness you were in when it occurred. By revising the outer event, you're actually revising the inner state that caused it. You're dissolving the emotional charge, the assumption, the state of consciousness that produced the unwanted result. And once you dissolve the cause, the effect can no longer continue. Future events that would have grown from that seed can no longer grow. You've changed the past, and therefore changed the future that would have flowed from it. I know this sounds impossible to the rational mind. How can you change what's already happened? But I'm not asking you to change physical history. I'm asking you to change your memory of it, your mental record of it. And since consciousness is the only reality, changing the mental record changes the reality. I've seen this work countless times. People revise arguments and find the person they argued with suddenly becomes friendly. People revise failures and find new opportunities opening that wouldn't have existed otherwise. People revise sickness and find themselves healed. It's not magic, it's law. Consciousness determines all. Change your consciousness of the past, and you change the present that flows from it. And here's the deeper truth about revision. It's an act of forgiveness. When you revise an event, you're forgiving it. You're saying, I no longer accept this as the truth of my experience. I choose a different truth. And forgiveness is the life of the round imagination. Without the power to revise, to forgive, to recreate, you remain imprisoned by your past. Every mistake, every disappointment, every trauma continues to echo through your life, creating more of the same. But with revision, you become free. You become the master of your own history. You're no longer a victim of what happened. You're the author, rewriting the script to align with your ideal. So, tonight, I want you to practice revision. Think of one event from today that you wish had gone differently. It doesn't have to be major. It can be something small, a moment of frustration, a harsh word, a missed opportunity. Close your eyes and replay that event, but change it. See it unfolding perfectly. Feel the satisfaction of the revised version and fall asleep in that revision. Do this every night. Make it a habit. And you'll find that not only do past events lose their power over you, but your entire life begins to shift because you're no longer carrying the weight of an unrevised past. Now, let me address something that causes a lot of confusion. People ask me, does the law work for everyone? Does it work regardless of your past, your circumstances, your limitations? And the answer is yes. Absolutely yes. The law is completely impersonal. It doesn't care about your story. It doesn't care about your history. It doesn't care about your trauma, your failures, your so-called limitations. It responds only to your state of consciousness. Now, that's it. This very moment, you can be anything regardless of what you've been. You can have anything regardless of what you've had, because the law operates in the eternal now, and in the now all things are possible. But here's where people get stuck. They say, but I've always been poor. But I've always been sick. But I've always been unloved. And they use their past as evidence that they can't change. But your past is not evidence of anything except the state of consciousness you were in when you created it. If you've always been poor, it's because you've always occupied the state of poverty. If you've always been sick, it's because you've always occupied the state of sickness. If you've always been unloved, it's because you've always occupied the state of being unloved. But those states are not you. They're just states you've been in, and you can leave them at any time simply by assuming a new state. The Bible says, "Before Abraham was, I am." This is one of the most profound statements in all of Scripture. Abraham represents your history, your ancestry, your past. But I am, your consciousness, your sense of being, exists before and beyond all history. Your I am is not determined by what came before. It determines what comes after. You are not the product of your past. Your past is the product of you, of the state of consciousness you occupied. And since you can change your state of consciousness right now, you can change your future right now. The past has no power except the power you give it by continuing to occupy the same state. So, if you've been poor your whole life, so what? Assume wealth now. If you've been sick, assume health now. If you've been unloved, assume love now. The law doesn't ask for your resume. It doesn't require a certain background or a certain level of deservingness. It simply says whatever you assume and persist in assuming you will become. That's the promise. And it's a promise, available to everyone without exception. But you must understand something crucial. Assuming a new state means abandoning the old one. You can't be in two states at once. You can't be poor and wealthy simultaneously. You can't be sick and healthy simultaneously. You can't be unloved and loved simultaneously. You must choose, and choosing means letting go of your identification with the old state. This is what Scripture means when it talks about dying to the old man and being reborn as the new man. It's not a physical death. It's a psychological death. You must die to the self-concept that has been limiting you. You must shed it like an old coat and put on a new one. And this is where most people fail. They want the new without releasing the old. They want to assume wealth while still identifying as poor. They want to assume health while still identifying as sick. But you can't serve two masters. You must make a complete break. You must commit fully to the new state and refuse to return to the old one, even for a moment, even in your thoughts. This is what it means to be faithful to your assumption. Faithfulness doesn't mean believing it will happen someday. Faithfulness means living as though it's already true now, regardless of appearances. Let me talk about inner conversations because this is an area where most people sabotage themselves without even realizing it. Your inner conversation is the dialogue you have with yourself all day long. Most of this dialogue is automatic, unconscious, habitual, and most of it is negative, critical, fearful. You're constantly telling yourself stories about what you can't do, what you don't have. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with others? What's wrong with the world? And these inner conversations are not harmless. They're creative. Every thought you think, every word you speak to yourself is an assumption, and assumptions harden into facts. If you spend your day mentally arguing with your boss, what do you create? A boss who argues with you. If you spend your day mentally complaining about lack, what do you create? More lack. If you spend your day mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios, what do you create those scenarios? Your inner conversation is the invisible architect of your life. Change the conversation, and you change the architecture. So, here's what I want you to do for one full day. Become a witness to your inner speech. Don't try to change it yet. Just notice it. Notice what you're saying to yourself. Notice the tone. Notice the content. Notice how much of it is negative. How much of it is repetitive? How much of it is reinforcing the very conditions you're trying to escape? Just notice. And then ask yourself, if my inner conversation is creating my outer world, what kind of world am I creating with these thoughts? If you're honest, you'll see that your inner conversation perfectly matches your outer experience. You're not a victim of circumstance. You're the author of circumstance through your unexamined inner speech. Once you've become aware of your inner conversation, you can begin to change it. And the way to change it is through revision. Every time you catch yourself in a negative or fearful inner dialogue, stop. Right there in the moment, revise it. If you're mentally arguing with someone, stop and imagine a friendly conversation instead. If you're mentally complaining about money, stop and imagine abundance instead. If you're mentally rehearsing failure, stop and imagine success instead. Don't wait until night to do this. Do it in the far moment throughout the day. Every single time you catch yourself, this takes vigilance. It takes self-awareness, but it's worth it because your inner conversation is your real prayer. Not the words you say in church, or temple, or mosque. Not the affirmations you recite. Your inner conversation, the constant stream of thought running through your mind, is your prayer, and it's being answered constantly, every moment. The law is responding to your inner conversation, shaping your world to match it. So, if you want to change your world, you must change your inner conversation. There's no way around it. Now, let me explain the technique that ties all of this together. It's what I call the imaginal act. This is the core practice, the one that, if done correctly, will change your entire life. Here's how it works. You select a single scene that implies your wish is fulfilled. Not the wish itself, but a scene that would only exist if the wish were already true. For example, if you want wealth, you don't imagine money. You imagine a scene that implies you're wealthy. Maybe you're shaking hands with your accountant and he's congratulating you on your financial success. Maybe you're signing documents for a purchase you could only make if you were wealthy. Maybe you're looking at your bank statement and seeing a balance that reflects wealth. Whatever scene you choose, it must imply the wish fulfilled. Once you've chosen your scene, you condense it down to a single action, a handshake, a signature, a glance at a number. Something simple, something you can repeat easily in your imagination. And then at night, as you're entering the drowsy state before sleep, you replay this scene. But you don't watch it like a movie. You participate in it. You see it from your own eyes, first person. You feel it in your body. You hear the sounds. You engage all your senses to make it as vivid as possible. And you loop it. You play it over and over, feeling the satisfaction, the naturalness, the reality of it. And you do this until you fall asleep. This is the imaginal act. And it's powerful because it bypasses your conscious mind and impresses your subconscious directly. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's physically happening and what's vividly imagined. If you imagine something with enough sensory detail and enough feeling, your subconscious accepts it as real. And once your subconscious accepts it as real, it begins to externalize it. It begins to create the circumstances, events, and encounters that will make your imaginal act physically true. But here's the key. You must persist. One night isn't enough. You must do this night after night until the scene feels completely natural, until it feels boring, even until you can barely distinguish between the imagined scene and a physical memory. That's when you know it's impressed. That's when you know the subconscious has accepted it. And once it's accepted, you can drop it. You don't need to keep repeating it. You can let it go and trust that the law is working to bring it to pass. How long does this take? It varies. Some assumptions externalize in days. Others take weeks or months. It depends on how natural the assumption feels to you and how faithfully you persist in it. But I can tell you this, if you do this practice sincerely, with feeling, with persistence, it will work. It must work because you're not hoping for something to happen. You're not asking for something. You're creating it in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. Everything in the outer world is simply consciousness pushed out, solidified, made visible. Change your consciousness, and you change your world. It's that simple. Let me give you one more practice. Something you can do throughout the day, not just at night. Live from the end. What does this mean? It means you conduct yourself as though your desire is already fulfilled. Not in a fake way, not in a trying way, but in a natural way. You let your actions, your reactions, your choices flow from the assumption that what you want is already true. If you're assuming wealth, how would a wealthy person go through their day? They wouldn't worry about money. They wouldn't check prices obsessively. They wouldn't panic about bills. They'd be natural, easy, confident. So, you be that way, not because you're pretending, but because you're occupying that state, in consciousness. If you're assuming love, how would a loved person go through their day? They wouldn't be desperate for attention. They wouldn't be insecure. They wouldn't be clingy or needy. They'd be confident, open, generous. So you be that way. If you're assuming health, how would a healthy person go through their day? They wouldn't obsess over symptoms. They wouldn't fear their body. They wouldn't identify with illness. They'd be energetic, vital, at ease. So you be that way. You see, living from the end is not about fooling yourself. It's about recognizing that the end exists now in consciousness and choosing to occupy it fully. This doesn't mean you ignore practical things. It doesn't mean you don't take action in the world. It means your action comes from the state of the wish fulfilled rather than from the state of lack. There's a huge difference. Action from lack is desperate, forced, anxious. Action from fulfillment is natural, inspired, effortless. When you occupy the state of the wish fulfilled, the right actions present themselves naturally. You don't have to figure out what to do. You just know, and you move in that direction without strain. So, as we come to the end of this teaching, I want to bring everything together. You came here because nothing was working, because you tried all the techniques and the law seemed silent, unresponsive, even cruel. But now you know the truth. The law has never been silent. It has been speaking through every circumstance of your life, echoing back to you the assumptions you held, the states you occupied, the inner conversations you carried. The techniques didn't fail because they were wrong. They failed because you were using them as tools to get somewhere instead of recognizing that you must first be there in consciousness before reality can reflect it. Everything I've taught you tonight comes down to this one principle. Consciousness is the only reality, and assumption hardens into fact. That's the law. It's simple, it's elegant, it's absolute. You don't need complicated rituals. You don't need special formulas. You don't need to wait for the stars to align. You simply need to understand that whatever you assume and persist in assuming, you will become. Your entire life is a reflection of your habitual state of consciousness. Change your state, and you change your life. It's that straightforward. But here's what I need you to really hear. You are not broken. You've simply been standing in the wrong state. Every failure, every disappointment, every setback has been the law working perfectly. showing you exactly what state you were in. The law never fails. It responds with perfect accuracy to your assumptions. If you've been experiencing lack, it's because you've been assuming lack. If you've been experiencing limitation, it's because you've been assuming limitation. But the moment you assume abundance, the moment you assume freedom, the law will respond with equal accuracy. It must. It has no choice. So I'm giving you a mantra now, something to anchor this teaching in your consciousness. I want you to say this to yourself, and I want you to mean it. Say it until you feel it. Feel it until it becomes natural. Here it is. I am already that which I desire to be. My consciousness is the only reality. What I assume in feeling I become, in fact. Say it again. I am already that which I desire to be. My consciousness is the only reality. What I assume in feeling I become, in fact. This is the truth. Not a hopeful wish, not a maybe. The truth. And the more you affirm this truth, the more you'll feel its reality. Now, I want you to make a decision right now in this moment. What state of consciousness are you going to occupy? Are you going to remain in the state of lack, of waiting, of hoping? Or are you going to step into the state of the wish fulfilled? You don't need permission. You don't need preparation. You don't need to be ready. You simply need to choose. Assume the feeling of already being what you want to be. Assume it now, not tomorrow. Now. Feel it in your body. Let it saturate your awareness and refuse to leave that state. No matter what your senses show you. Tonight, when you go to bed, you're going to practice the imaginal act. You're going to select your scene, the one that implies your wish fulfilled. You're going to replay it in the drowsy state before sleep. You're going to feel it, live it, make it real in your imagination, and you're going to fall asleep in that feeling. And tomorrow, you're going to live from that state. You're going to conduct yourself as though your assumption is already fact. And you're going to persist day after day, night after night. You're going to persist in occupying the state of the wish fulfilled until it hardens into fact. And it will harden into fact. I promise you this, not because I have some special power, but because the law is impersonal and absolute. It worked for the soldier who wanted his discharge. It worked for me when I wanted to go to Barbados. It worked for the costume designer who changed her producers' behavior. And it will work for you. Not because you're special, or deserving or lucky, but because you're conscious. And consciousness, when directed, creates. That's the promise. That's the guarantee. So go now and test it. Do not theorize. Do not debate. Do not wait for proof before you. Assume. Assume first, and the proof will follow. Assume the feeling of the wish, fulfilled tonight. Fall asleep in that assumption, and watch how the invisible hand of your own wonderful human imagination moves mountains to honor your claim. The world has no choice but to conform to your assumption. You are the operant power. You are the creator of your experience. And when you fully realize this, when you fully claim this, nothing will ever be impossible for you again. Before I close, I want to invite you to do something. If this teaching has resonated with you, if you feel the truth of it stirring in your consciousness, leave a comment below. Not for my benefit, but for yours. Write down the desire you're now ready to claim as already fulfilled. Declare it, anchor it, say it out loud, into the world. Because declaring it makes it more real in your own awareness. And if you found value in this teaching, subscribe to this channel. Come back. We have only scratched the surface of what I have to share with you about the infinite creative power that lies within your own consciousness. There are depths we haven't explored yet. There are mysteries we haven't unveiled, and I want to guide you through all of it. But more than subscribing, more than commenting, I want you to apply this. I want you to live it. I want you to prove it to yourself through your own experience. Because no amount of listening, no amount of understanding intellectually will change your life. Only application will, only assumption will, only the willingness to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled and persist in it until it externalizes will transform your world. So don't just nod along. Don't just say yes. This makes sense. Do it tonight. Choose your scene. Feel it. Live it. And let the law prove itself to you. And remember, when doubts arise, when circumstances seem to contradict your assumption, when the outer world screams that your assumption is false, do not waver. Remain faithful. The outer world is always the last to conform. Consciousness is first. The change happens in consciousness before it appears in the world. So, if you change, your consciousness and the world hasn't changed yet, that doesn't mean the law isn't working. It means you're in the interval. You're in the gap between assumption and manifestation. And your job in that interval is simply to remain faithful to your assumption. Don't let appearances shake you. Don't let delay discourage you. Just persist and the law will fulfill itself. I'll close with one final thought. You are not a powerless being at the mercy of circumstance. You are not a victim of fate or chance or external forces. You are the very consciousness through which God creates. You are, I am, and I am is the name of God. When you say, I am poor, God is poor through you. When you say, I am sick, God is sick through you. When you say, I am unloved, God is unloved through you. But when you say, I am wealthy, God is wealthy through you. When you say, I am healthy, God is healthy through you. When you say, I am loved, God is loved through you. You are not separate from the creative power. You are the creative power in human form. So, claim your power. Claim your divinity. Claim your wish fulfilled, and do it now, not someday. The kingdom of heaven is within you. It's not a place you go to. It's a state you occupy, and in that state, all things are yours. All things, every desire, every dream, every longing of your heart already exists in that kingdom, in that state, waiting for you to claim it. So claim it, assume it, live it, and watch as your entire world reshapes itself to honor the God that you are. Now let me go deeper into something that many people struggle with. They say, but Florence, I've tried to assume the state and I can't hold it. My mind wanders, doubts creep in, the old state pulls me back. And I understand this. This is the human condition. You've been occupying your current state for so long that it has momentum, it has weight, it has familiarity. And your consciousness naturally gravitates back to it unless you're vigilant. But here's what you must understand. Changing states is like changing rooms in a house. When you first enter a new room, it feels unfamiliar. The furniture is in different places. The light is different. The smell is different. Everything is strange. But if you stay in that room, if you refuse to leave it, eventually it becomes familiar. Eventually it becomes home, and the old room, the one you left, begins to feel strange. This is how assumption works. At first, assuming the state of the wish fulfilled will feel unnatural. Your conscious mind will resist. It will say, "This isn't real. You're lying to yourself. Nothing has changed." But you must not listen to that voice. That voice is simply the echo of your old state trying to maintain itself. It's the old room calling you back, but you must stay in the new room. You must persist in the new assumption until it becomes your natural state. And the way you persist is through frequency, not length. You don't need to imagine for hours. You need to imagine frequently. Return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled many times throughout the day. Even if it's just for a moment. Even if it's just a few seconds. Each time you return to it, you're strengthening that state. You're making it more real. You're giving it momentum. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to change the course of a great river. You can't do it in one mighty effort. You can't just push the water and expect it to flow in a new direction. But if you place a stone here, another stone there, gradually building a new channel, eventually the water will follow the new path. That's what you're doing with frequent assumption. Each time you return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you're placing another stone. You're carving a new channel in consciousness, and eventually your entire stream of thought will flow naturally in that direction. So don't be discouraged. If you can't maintain the state perfectly at first, no one can, even I. After all these years, sometimes find my mind wandering back to old patterns. But the difference is, I catch myself. I notice when I've slipped back into an unwanted state, and I immediately return to the state I've chosen. This is the practice. Not perfection, but correction. Not maintaining the state without any breaks, but returning to it consistently. Whenever you notice you've left it, that's all that's required. Just keep coming back. Keep occupying the state. Keep feeling the wish fulfilled. And gradually, imperceptibly, it will become your natural state. And when it becomes natural, it must externalize. Let me tell you something else that's important. Many people create resistance by being too specific about the how. They say, "I want wealth, but it has to come through this specific job." "I want love, but it has to be with this specific person." "I want health, but it has to happen through this specific treatment." And by being so specific about the means, they block the law from working in ways they haven't imagined. The law is infinitely creative. It has access to possibilities you can't see from your current state. So when you assume the end, assume only the end. Don't specify the means. Don't dictate how it must happen. Just assume that it has happened and let the law surprise you with the ways it fulfills itself. I once knew a man who desperately wanted a sum of money. He needed exactly $5,000 for a specific purpose. And he tried everything. He applied for loans. He asked friends and family. He looked for extra work. Nothing materialized. And he became frustrated because he was so focused on how the money would come. But then he heard this teaching, and he decided to stop worrying about how and simply assume that he had the $5,000. He stopped looking for it. He stopped scheming for it. He simply occupied the state of already having it. And within 2 weeks, he received a phone call from a lawyer. A distant relative he barely knew had passed away and left him exactly $5,000 in the will. He had never expected this. He hadn't even known this relative was alive. But the law found a way to fulfill his assumption that he had no way of foreseeing. This is why I say don't concern yourself with the means. The means will always appear once you occupy the state. Your job is simply to be clear about the end, about what you want to be or have, and then occupy that state fully. The bridge of incidents will build itself. The how will take care of itself. The law is far more intelligent than your conscious mind. It has access to all possibilities, all people, all circumstances. It will orchestrate events in ways you can't imagine. So trust it. Assume the end and let go of the means. Now, there's another question people often ask. They say, what if I assume something and the opposite happens? What if I assume wealth and I lose my job? What if I assume health and I get sicker? What if I assume love and my relationship ends? Does this mean the law isn't working? No. It means you're being tested. It means the old state is making its final stand before it dissolves. Think of it this way. When you assume a new state, you're essentially declaring war on the old state, and the old state doesn't give up without a fight. It will throw everything it can at you to make you doubt, to make you waver, to make you return to it. It will create circumstances that seem to contradict your assumption. It will whisper in your ear that you were foolish to believe, that nothing has changed, that you should give up. But this is the crucial moment. This is where most people fail. They assume the new state, and then when the old state makes its last desperate push, they panic. They say, see, it's not working. Things are getting worse. And they abandon the new assumption and return to the old state. But if they had just persisted a little longer, if they had remained faithful to the new assumption despite the contradictory evidence, they would have broken through. The old state would have dissolved, the new state would have solidified, and the outer world would have conformed. I'll give you an example. A woman once came to me who desperately wanted to be married. She had been alone for years, and she longed for a partner. So she began assuming she was happily married. She felt the ring on her finger. She imagined her husband beside her. She occupied that state fully. And then, within a week, her ex-boyfriend, a man she had a very troubled relationship with, contacted her and wanted to get back together. She was confused. She said, I'm assuming a happy marriage, but this man made me miserable. Why is he showing up? And I told her, this is the old state making one last appearance. This is the universe testing your commitment to your new assumption. If you go back to him, you're returning to the old state. But if you remain faithful to your assumption of a happy marriage with the right partner, he will disappear and the right person will appear. She listened. She didn't respond to the ex-boyfriend. She remained faithful to her assumption, and within a month, she met someone new, someone who matched her assumption perfectly. They fell in love, and within a year, they were married. But if she had wavered, if she had taken that ex-boyfriend back because he was there and familiar, she would have reinforced the old state. She would have created more of what she didn't want. So when circumstances seem to contradict your assumption, don't panic, don't waver. Recognize it for what it is, the old state making its last stand, and remain faithful. Persist and you will break through. Let me talk about something that's absolutely crucial but rarely discussed: the difference between wanting and having. Most people spend their entire lives in the state of wanting. They want wealth. They want love. They want health. They want freedom. And because they're always wanting, they're always lacking. Because wanting implies absence. You can only want what you don't have. So every moment you spend in the state of wanting, you're affirming that you don't have what you desire. you're creating more wanting, more lack, more absence. This is the trap that most people fall into without realizing it. The law doesn't respond to want, it responds to having. It responds to the consciousness of already possessing. So you must make a fundamental shift in your consciousness. You must stop wanting and start having, not in the physical world that will come later, but in consciousness, which is the only reality that matters. You must claim your desire now, not as something you hope to have in the future, but as something you have right now in consciousness. And when you truly have it in consciousness, when you've shifted from wanting to having, the outer world must reflect that having. But how do you make this shift? How do you stop wanting something you clearly don't have physically? This is where imagination comes in. Imagination is not fantasy. Imagination is the creative power itself. It's the very mechanism by which consciousness creates reality. When you imagine something vividly enough, when you give it sensory reality in your mind, your consciousness accepts it as real. And what consciousness accepts as real must become real in the outer world. Because consciousness is the only reality. The outer world is just consciousness pushed out, made visible, solidified. So the practice is this. Stop dwelling on the absence of your desire in the physical world. Stop noticing that you don't have it yet. Stop checking your bank account to confirm you're not wealthy. Stop looking in the mirror to confirm you're not healthy. Stop looking at your empty bed to confirm you're not loved. Every time. If you do this, you're affirming the old state. You're strengthening the very condition you want to change. Instead, dwell in imagination on the presence of your desire. See it, feel it, experience it in your mind as though it were physically real. And do this so frequently, so vividly that your consciousness begins to accept the imagined state as more real than the physical state. When your consciousness accepts the imagined state as real, something miraculous happens. You stop wanting. You stop reaching for it because you already have it in the only place that matters in consciousness. And this shift, this movement from wanting to having, is what triggers the law. Suddenly, effortlessly, circumstances begin to shift. Opportunities appear. People show up. Events unfold. And before you know it, the physical world has rearranged itself to match your inner state. This is not magic. This is law. This is how creation works. I want to address another common problem, the problem of mixed states. Many people assume the state of the wish fulfilled for a few minutes during their meditation or visualization, but then they spend the other 23 hours of the day dwelling in the opposite state. They imagine wealth for 10 minutes before bed, but then they spend the whole next day worrying about money, complaining about bills, feeling anxious about their bank balance. They imagine health for a few minutes, but then they spend the rest of the day focused on their symptoms, talking about their illness, identifying with being sick. They imagine love for a moment, but then they spend hours feeling lonely, rejected, unworthy of love, and then they wonder why nothing changes. The reason nothing changes is because they're not actually changing states. They're briefly visiting the new state and then immediately returning to the old state. It's like standing in a cold room, walking into a warm room for 10 seconds, and then walking back into the cold room and wondering why you're not warm. You can't change your experience by briefly touching a new state. You must occupy it, you must live in it, you must refuse to return to the old state. This doesn't mean you need to maintain perfect focus every second of every day. That's not realistic and it's not necessary. What it means is you need to Make the new state your dominant state. You need to return to it more often than you return to the old state. You need to catch yourself when you slip back into the old patterns of thought and immediately correct yourself. If you find yourself worrying about money, stop. Return to the feeling of wealth. If you find yourself focusing on symptoms, stop. Return to the feeling of health. If you find yourself feeling unloved, stop. Return to the feeling of being loved. Think of it like training a puppy. The puppy will wander off, that's its nature. But you gently bring it back, again and again, patiently, persistently. Eventually, the puppy learns to stay. Your consciousness is the same. It will wander back to old familiar states. But you gently bring it back to the new state again and again. And eventually, the new state becomes the familiar state, the new state becomes home, and when that happens, the old state can no longer exist in your experience because you're no longer occupying it. Let me tell you about the power of mental preparation. Most people wait until they have what they want before they prepare for it. They say, when I get the money, then I'll plan what to do with it. When I get the relationship, then I'll prepare my life for a partner. When I get the health, then I'll plan my activities. But this is backwards. This is thinking from lack. Because by waiting to prepare, you're affirming that you don't have it yet. You're confirming the absence. But when you prepare in advance, when you mentally to make space for your desire before it arrives physically, you're affirming its presence. You're living from the end. Let me give you examples. If you want wealth, prepare for it now. Not by spending money you don't have, but by mentally organizing what you'll do with your wealth. Plan the investments, choose the charities, decide on the purchases, make it real in your mind. If you want a relationship, prepare for it now. Clear space in your closet for your partner's clothes. Buy groceries for 2. Set the table for 2. Make mental and physical space for the person you're assuming into your life. If you want health, prepare for it now. Plan the activities you'll do when you're healthy. Sign up for that class. Buy those walking shoes. Make appointments for things you've been putting off. Act as though you're already healthy. This is living from the end. This is assuming the state so completely that you're already making practical preparations for its physical manifestation. And when you do this, when you prepare in advance, you're sending a powerful message to your subconscious. You're saying, this is real, this is happening, this is certain. And your subconscious, which accepts what you impress upon it, begins to work to make it physically true. I knew a man who wanted to be a successful writer. He had never published anything. He had never made $1 from writing, but he decided to assume the state of being a successful author. And one of the things he did was prepare in advance. He set up a beautiful office in his home, as though he were already a successful writer. He bought professional letterhead. He created a website. He designed business cards with the title author on them. He did all of this before he had written a single published word. His friends thought he was crazy. They said, "You're not an author, you're pretending." But he understood something they didn't. He understood that by preparing in advance, he was occupying the state of being an author. He was thinking from the end. And within 6 months, he had a book deal. Within a year, he was making his living as a writer. The physical preparation had reinforced the mental assumption, and the assumption had hardened into fact. So ask yourself, what can I prepare now that would imply my wish is already fulfilled? not big, expensive things that would put you in debt, but simple mental and physical preparations that signal to your consciousness that your desire is real, present, certain, and then make those preparations, because in doing so, you're not just hoping for your desire to come, you're living as though it's already here. You're occupying the state, and that's all the law requires. Now I want to talk about something that might surprise you: the power of thanksgiving. When you thank God, or the universe, or whatever you call the creative power for something you don't yet have physically, what are you doing? You're assuming you have it. You are occupying the state of already having received it, because you can only give thanks for what you have, not for what you lack. So, thanksgiving is actually one of the purest forms of assumption. It's a declaration that your desire is already fulfilled. The Bible says, "Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise." What does this mean psychologically? It means enter into the consciousness of the wish fulfilled with the feeling of gratitude. Don't approach your desire with begging, with pleading, with desperation. Approach it with thanks. Thank the creative power within you for already having given you what you desire. Feel the gratitude as though it's already done. And in feeling that gratitude, you're occupying the state of the wish fulfilled. I practice this every night. Before I sleep, I give thanks for the things I'm assuming. Not hoping for, not wishing for, but assuming. I say, "Thank you for my health. Thank you for my abundance. Thank you for the love in my life. Thank you for the success of my work." And I feel genuine gratitude as I say these words, because in my consciousness, these things are already real. They're already mine. And by giving thanks, I'm confirming their reality. I'm occupying the state where they exist, and the law must respond to that state. So tonight, before you fall asleep, after you've done your imaginal act, spend a few moments in thanksgiving. Thank the I am within you for already having fulfilled your desire. Feel the gratitude. Let it fill you and fall asleep in that feeling of thanksgiving. Because gratitude is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's the natural response to having received what you desired. And when you feel it before you physically received it, you're collapsing time. You're bringing the future into the present. You're making your desire real in the only place that matters in consciousness. Let me address a question that troubles many people. They ask, is it selfish to use this law for personal gain? Is it wrong to desire wealth, success, recognition, material things? Should I only use it for spiritual purposes? And my answer is this: there is no separation between spiritual and material. Everything is consciousness. Your desire for wealth is just as valid as your desire for enlightenment, because both are states of consciousness. Both are mansions in your Father's house. The law doesn't judge your desires, it simply fulfills whatever you assume. So if you desire wealth, assume wealth. If you desire recognition, assume recognition. If you desire material comfort, assume material comfort. There's nothing wrong with these desires. They're part of the human experience. But I will tell you this: as you grow in your understanding of this law, as you realize your own creative power, your desires will naturally evolve. You'll begin to desire states of consciousness more than material things. You'll begin to desire the feeling of accomplishment more than the accomplishment itself. You'll begin to desire the consciousness of abundance more than specific amounts of money. This is natural growth, but don't force it. Don't suppress your current desires because you think they're not spiritual enough. Honor where you are. Work with the desires you have now. And as you prove the law to yourself, as you see it working in your life, your desires will naturally mature and expand. I also want to tell you that there's tremendous power in assuming states of consciousness that benefit others. When you assume that someone else is healed, that someone else is successful, that someone else is happy, you are exercising the same creative power. And often assuming states for others is easier than assuming them for yourself because you don't have as much resistance. You don't have as much doubt. So if you're struggling to assume something for yourself, try assuming it for someone else first. Assume that your friend is healthy. Assume that your child is successful. Assume that your partner is happy. And as you see the law working through your assumptions for others, your faith in it will grow, and you'll find it easier to assume states for yourself. But here's something important. When you assume a state for someone else, you must assume it's already true. Not that it will be true. You must see them as already being in that state. If someone is sick and you want to help them, don't see them as sick and pray for their healing. That reinforces their sickness. Instead, see them as healthy. See them vibrant, energetic. Well, refuse to accept the evidence of their current condition. Hold the vision of them in the state of health until it becomes more real to you than their physical symptoms. And if you can do this faithfully, if you can persist in seeing them as healed, regardless of appearances, they will heal because you're not separate from them. We're all one consciousness. And when you change your consciousness of them, you change them. I've seen this work countless times. I've seen people heal others through the power of assumption. I've seen marriages restored. I've seen businesses saved. I've seen impossible situations resolved, all because someone held a vision of the desired end and refused to accept anything less. So don't limit this power to yourself. Use it generously for others. Use it to bless everyone in your life. And you'll find that as you bless others, you bless yourself. Because there's no separation. What you give out, you receive. What you assume for others, you strengthen in yourself. This is the law of consciousness. Now, let me tell you something that might challenge you. The law of assumption works, whether you believe in it or not. You're always assuming something. You're always in a state of consciousness. And whatever state you're in is creating your experience. Most people are using this law unconsciously, negatively, creating the very things they don't want. They assume they're not good enough and they experience rejection. They assume they can't afford things and they experience poverty. They assume they're sick and they experience illness. They assume no one loves them and they experience loneliness. They're using the law perfectly. They're just using it to create what they don't want. So the question is not whether the law works. The question is, are you going to use it consciously or unconsciously? Are you going to direct it toward what you want or continue to direct it toward what you don't want? This is your choice, and it's a choice you make every single moment through your assumptions, through your inner conversations, through the states you occupy. You can't not use the law. You can only use it consciously or unconsciously, positively or negatively, deliberately or by default. This is why I'm so passionate about teaching this. Because once you understand that you're always creating through your assumptions, you can't help but become more conscious of what you're assuming. You start catching yourself in negative assumptions. You start noticing when you're occupying unwanted states, and you start deliberately choosing better assumptions, better states, better conversations with yourself. And this is how you transform your life, not by changing external circumstances directly, but by changing the consciousness that creates those circumstances. Let me give you a practice that will accelerate your transformation. Every evening before you do your imaginal act and fall asleep, review your day. But don't just passively remember what happened. Actively revise it. Go through the events of your day and identify anything that didn't match your ideal, any moment of fear, lack, anger, disappointment, failure, and then revise those moments. Replay them in your imagination, but change them to match how you wish they had unfolded. If you had an argument, revise it to a peaceful conversation. If you felt lack, revise it to abundance. If you experience rejection, revise it to acceptance. Make the revised version as vivid as the original. Feel the emotions of the clear, revised scenes, and as you fall asleep, let these revised scenes be the last things in your consciousness. What you're doing is dissolving the creative power of the unwanted events. You're canceling their ability to reproduce themselves in your future because every event that happens carries a seed of future events. An argument today will create more arguments tomorrow unless you revise it. Lack today will create more lack tomorrow unless you revise it. But when you revise an event, you change its seed. You change what will grow from. This is enormous power. This is the ability to literally rewrite your history and therefore rewrite your future. And all it takes is a few minutes each night before sleep. I've practiced revision for decades, and I can tell you it's one of the most transformative practices I know. It keeps you from carrying the weight of the day into tomorrow. It keeps past disappointments from poisoning your future. It gives you mastery over your own experience because you're no longer at the mercy of what happens to you. You have the power to revise, to forgive, to recreate. This is what it means to be made in the image of God. You have the same creative power God has. The power to create and recreate, to form and reform, to make and remake your world through the power of your imagination. So tonight, make revision part of your practice. Don't just imagine the wish fulfilled for the future. Revise the past that doesn't match that wish. Clean up your history. Dissolve the old patterns. Free yourself from the prison of unchangeable circumstances, because nothing is unchangeable in consciousness, and consciousness is the only thing that's real. Everything else is just its shadow subject to change the moment consciousness changes. Let me tell you about the power of persistence one more time, because this is where most people falter. They assume for a night, maybe a week, maybe even a month. But then they get discouraged because they don't see immediate results. They say, "I've been doing this for weeks and nothing has changed." And they give up. They go back to their old assumptions, their old states, their old patterns, and then they say, "The law doesn't work." But the law does work. It works with mathematical precision. It's just that they stopped working the law before it had time to externalize. An assumption is like a seed planted in the ground. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You don't stand over it, demanding that it sprout immediately. You plant it, you water it, and you trust that beneath the surface, invisible to your eyes, the seed is germinating. It's putting down roots. It's preparing to break through the soil. And then one day, when the time is right, the sprout appears. Not because you forced it, but because you trusted the natural process. You persisted in watering and caring for it without needing to see immediate evidence. This is how assumption works. When you assume a new state, you're planting a seed in the soil of consciousness, and that seed begins to work beneath the surface, invisible to your senses. It's rearranging circumstances, aligning events, moving people, creating opportunities. All of this is happening in the invisible realm before anything appears in the visible realm. But if you don't persist, if you dig up the seed by doubting, by checking for results, by returning to the old assumption, you kill the seed. You stop the process, and then you say it didn't work, but it would have worked if you had just persisted a little longer. I can't tell you exactly how long it will take for your assumption to externalize. It's different for everyone and for every assumption. Some assumptions externalize in days, others take weeks or months. It depends on how deeply rooted your old assumption was, how much resistance you have, how natural the new assumption feels to you. But I can tell you this with absolute certainty. If you persist, if you remain faithful to your assumption regardless of appearances, it will externalize. It must, because that's the law. An assumption, if persisted in, will harden into fact. There are no exceptions. The only variable is time, and time is just a function of your persistence and the variable naturalness of your assumption. So when doubts arise, when nothing seems to be happening, when the old conditions persist, don't take it as evidence that the law isn't working. Take it as evidence that you haven't persisted long enough. The seed is still germinating. The law is still working beneath the surface. Your job is simply to keep watering the seed, keep assuming, keep occupying the state, keep feeling the wish fulfilled, and trust that at the right moment the sprout will break through. The evidence will appear. The physical world will conform to your assumption. And here's something beautiful. Once you've proven the law to yourself, even once, your faith becomes unshakable. Because then you know, not believe, not hope, not think you know. You know that consciousness creates reality. You know that assumption hardens into fact. You know that you are the operant power in your life. And with that knowing comes a freedom that's indescribable because you realize you're never again at the mercy of circumstances. You're never again a victim. You're never again powerless. You have the greatest power in the universe. The power to choose your state of consciousness and persist in it until it becomes your reality. So make that choice now. Choose the state you want to occupy. Choose the person you want to be. Choose the life you want to live. Not someday, not when conditions are right, not when you feel ready. Now, this moment. Choose it in consciousness and persist in that choice, regardless of what the outer world shows you. Because the outer world is not the truth. Consciousness is the truth. And what you claim in consciousness must become fact, in experience. This is the promise. This is the law, and this is your inheritance as a conscious being. I want to close by speaking directly to your heart. You came here tonight feeling defeated, maybe even hopeless. You've tried so many things and they haven't worked. You've visualized, affirmed, acted as if, and still your life hasn't changed the way you wanted it to. And part of you has begun to believe that maybe you're the exception. Maybe you're the one person this doesn't work for. Maybe you're broken in some fundamental way that prevents you from creating the life you desire. But I'm here to tell you, from the depths of my being, with every ounce of conviction I possess, that you are not broken. You are not the exception. You are not blocked from your good. You are a perfect, complete, infinite expression of the creative power itself, the same power that creates galaxies and atoms, that makes flowers bloom and hearts beat. That power is within you as you. Being you, you are not separate from it, you are it. And this power responds to only one thing: your assumption of who you are and what you have. Every moment you've spent in lack, in limitation, in disappointment, has been the result of a mistaken assumption about yourself. You've assumed you're powerless, and so you've experienced powerlessness. You've assumed you're unworthy, and so you've experienced unworthiness. You've assumed life is hard, and so you've experienced hardness. But these assumptions are not the truth of you. They're just states you've been occupying, rooms you've been living in, and you can leave those rooms anytime you choose. You can walk into a new room, a new state, a new assumption about yourself and your life. And the moment you do, everything changes. So, I'm inviting you right now to make a choice. Let everything I've taught you tonight settle into your consciousness. Let it take root. Let it challenge every limiting belief you've ever held about yourself and your life. And then make a decision. Decide that from this moment forward, you are no longer going to be a victim of your circumstances. You're no longer going to wait for permission, for the right timing, for conditions to align. You're going to claim your desire now in consciousness, where it already exists. You're going to assume the state of the wish fulfilled and live from that state, regardless of what the world shows you. This is not positive thinking. This is not hope. This is not fantasy. This is the deliberate, conscious use of the only creative power in the universe: your imagination, your I am, your consciousness of being. And when you use it deliberately, when you assume what you want to be and persist in that assumption, the entire universe must rearrange itself to match. Not because you're forcing it, but because consciousness is the only reality, and reality must reflect consciousness. Tonight, as you lie down to sleep, you're going to do something you've never done before. You're going to assume your desire is fulfilled with complete conviction. You're not going to hope it works. You're not going to wish it works. You're going to know it works, because now you understand the principle. Now you understand that consciousness is the only reality. Now you understand that what you assume in consciousness must become fact in experience. This is law. This is truth. This is your power. So choose your scene. The one simple scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Make it short. Make it clear. Make it vivid. And tonight, in the drowsy state between waking and sleeping, when your conscious mind relaxes its grip and your subconscious becomes impressionable, you're going to live that scene. You're going to feel it in your body. You're going to see it through your own eyes. You're going to hear the sounds. You're going to make it so real that your senses respond as if it were physically happening, and you're going to fall asleep in that scene, in that feeling, in that state of the wish fulfilled. And tomorrow, you're going to live from that state. You're going to conduct yourself as the person who already has what you assumed. You're going to let your actions flow from that assumption. Not forced, not pretended, but natural, easy, authentic. because you've claimed it in consciousness. And consciousness is your true being. And you're going to persist in this assumption day after day, night after night, until it becomes so natural that you can't remember what it felt like to not have it. And when it reaches that level of naturalness, it will appear in your physical world. It must, because that's how the law works. And when it does appear, when you see your assumption reflected back to you in your physical circumstances, don't be surprised. Don't marvel at it as if it's a miracle. Recognize it as the natural, lawful result of your assumption, because this is your power. This is your birthright. This is how creation works. You are not a helpless being hoping for God's favor. You are God in human form, creating your experience through the power of your assumptions. And once you've proven this to yourself, once you've seen your assumption harden into fact, you'll never doubt again. You'll know. And with that, knowing comes a freedom, a joy, a power that nothing can take from you. Because you'll realize that nothing is impossible to you. Every desire, every dream, every longing of your heart is available to you right now in consciousness. And what's available in consciousness must become available in experience if you persist in the assumption. So go now with this knowledge. Go with this power. Go with this understanding. You are not who you thought you were. You are so much more. You are the infinite I am, the creative power itself expressing through this particular focus of consciousness you call yourself. And you have the power to be anything, to have anything, to experience anything you can imagine. Not someday, not in some future time. Now in consciousness and what you claim in consciousness, the world must grant you an experience. This is my promise to you. Not because I have some special ability, but because this is the law. This is how reality works. This is the structure of consciousness itself. And now that you know it, now that you understand it, you can never unknow it. You can never return to the old paradigm of victimhood and powerlessness. You've been awakened. You've been initiated. You've been given the keys to the kingdom. So use them. Use them tonight. Use them tomorrow. Use them every day for the rest of your life. Assume the noblest, highest, most beautiful state of consciousness you can imagine. Live from that state. Think from that state. Feel from that state. And watch as your entire world reshapes itself to honor the God that you are. I'll say it one more time. You are not broken. You have not been forgotten. You are not the exception. You are the rule. You are the law in operation. You are consciousness itself, creating your experience moment by moment through your assumptions. And now that you know this, now that you truly understand this, nothing will ever be the same. Until we meet again, be still and know that I am. You are the creator. You are the law. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible to you when you know this truth and live from it. Go now and create the life you were born to live. Not through struggle, not through effort, but through assumption, through the simple, profound act of claiming your desire as already fulfilled and refusing to accept anything less. This is the secret, this is the law, and this is your inheritance. As a conscious being, use it well, and may you know the freedom, the joy, and the infinite creative power that comes from living as the God you truly are. But before you go, let me give you some final guidance that will help you navigate the journey ahead. Because make no mistake, this is a journey. Not a journey through space or time, but a journey through states of consciousness. And like any journey, there will be moments of clarity and moments of confusion, moments of triumph and moments of doubt. What I'm about to share with you will help you navigate those moments with wisdom and persistence. First, understand that transformation happens in layers. You might assume a new state and experience some immediate shifts in your life, but not the complete fulfillment of your desire. This doesn't mean the law isn't working. It means you're being prepared for the fullness of what you've assumed. The law often works by degrees, bringing you experiences and lessons that align you more perfectly with your desired state. For example, if you assume wealth and suddenly you receive a small, unexpected amount of money, don't dismiss it as insignificant. Recognize it as evidence that the law is responding. Thank God for it. Accept it as the beginning, not the entirety, and persist in your assumption of the full measure of wealth you desire. I've seen people make this mistake countless times. They assume something magnificent and then receive something small and they say, "That's all. That's not what I preferred, wanted." And in saying that, in rejecting the partial fulfillment, they actually block the fuller manifestation because every small sign is the law saying, "I'm working, I'm responding." Keep assuming, keep persisting. It's like a flower beginning to bloom. You don't dismiss the first opening of the petals because the flower isn't fully open yet. You recognize it as the beginning of the bloom, and you trust that if you continue to water and nurture it, the full flower will appear. So accept every sign, every synchronicity, every small shift as evidence that your assumption is working. Don't compare it to the full manifestation and find it wanting. Celebrate it as confirmation that you're on the right path, and use it to strengthen your faith in the assumption. Because faith, remember, is not blind belief. Faith is the awareness of the reality of the invisible, and every small manifestation makes the invisible more real to you, strengthens your awareness of it, deepens your faith in. Second, expect a testing period. I mentioned this earlier, but let me expand on it because it's crucial. When you assume a new state, particularly one that represents a significant departure from your current experience, the old state will resist. It will create circumstances that seem to contradict your assumption. It will bring up fears, doubts, and old patterns. This is not the law failing. This is the old state, making its last stand before it dissolves completely. Think of it like this. Imagine you've lived in a dark room your entire life. Your eyes have adjusted to the darkness, and then, suddenly you decide to open the curtains and let light in. At first, the light will hurt. Your eyes will squint and tear up. The brightness will be uncomfortable, and part of you will want to close the curtains again and return to the familiar darkness. But if you persist, if you allow your eyes to adjust to the light, soon the darkness will be intolerable. The light will become your new normal, and you'll wonder how you ever lived in the dark. This is what happens when you assume a new state. The old state resists. It's uncomfortable. It challenges you. But if you persist, if you refuse to go back to the old state, no matter what resistance you encounter, the new state will become natural. It will become your reality, and the old state will fade into impossibility. So when the testing comes, and it will come, recognize it for what it is, Don't panic. Don't take it as evidence that your assumption isn't working. Take it as evidence that your assumption is working so powerfully that the old state is fighting for its survival, and remain faithful. Persist. Continue to occupy the new state in consciousness, regardless of what the outer world shows you, because the world is always the last to change. Consciousness changes first, and if you remain faithful to the change in consciousness, the outer world must eventually conform. Third, learn to recognize the voice of the true self versus the voice of the conditioned self. Throughout your day, you'll hear two voices in your mind. One is the voice of your true self, your I am, your infinite consciousness. This voice speaks with certainty, with peace, with knowing. It says things like, I am wealthy, I am loved, I am healthy, I am free. The other voice is the voice of your conditioned self, your ego, your limited sense of identity. This voice speaks with doubt, with fear, with limitation. It says things like, who are you kidding? This will never work. You're not good enough. You'll always be this way. Most people spend their entire lives listening to and believing the second voice. They think it's telling them the truth about reality, but it's not. It's telling them the truth about their conditioning, their past assumptions, their habitual patterns. It's the voice of the old state trying to maintain itself. And the tragedy is that, by believing this voice, by accepting its declarations as truth, they keep creating the very limitations it describes. But once you understand this law, once you realize that you are the infinite I am, and that this conditioned voice is just an echo of old assumptions, you can choose which voice to listen to. You can choose to give your attention, your belief, your creative power to the voice of your true self. And every time you do, you weaken the conditioned voice and strengthen the true voice. Eventually, the conditioned voice fades to a whisper you can barely hear, and the voice of your true self becomes the only voice you trust. So, practice distinguishing between these voices. When you hear a limiting thought, recognize it as the voice of conditioning. Don't argue with it. Don't fight it. Don't give it energy by resisting it. Simply recognize it as the old state speaking, and then deliberately choose to listen to the voice of your true self instead. Say to yourself, that's not the truth of me. The truth of me is I am that which I desire to be. And feel the difference in your body when you make this shift. The voice of limitation creates tension, contraction, fear. The voice of truth creates expansion, peace, certainty. Fourth, understand the power of the Sabbath. In Scripture, we're told to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Most people think this is talking about a specific day of the week when you're not supposed to work. But that's not what it means psychologically. The Sabbath is the state of rest, the state where you cease from your own works and allow the law to work for you. It's the state where you stop trying, stop effort, stop struggling, and simply rest in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. This is one of the most difficult things for people to do because we're conditioned to believe that if we're not doing something, nothing will happen. We're conditioned to believe that we have to make things happen through our effort and action. But the truth is, consciousness creates reality, not action. Action is important, but it should flow from your assumption, not create your assumption. When you rest in the assumption of the wish fulfilled, when you cease from your own works and allow the I am within you to work, miracles happen. Circumstances arrange themselves. People show up. Opportunities present themselves. and everything flows with ease because you're not blocking the law with your effort. So practice entering the Sabbath. Practice resting in your assumption. Practice ceasing from your works. This doesn't mean you become passive or lazy. It means you stop trying to force outcomes. You stop manipulating circumstances. You stop exhausting yourself with effort. Instead, you assume the end and you rest in that assumption, trusting that the law is working on your behalf, even when you're doing nothing. And you'll find that when you act from this place of rest, when you act from the assumption already fulfilled, your actions are inspired, effective, and effortless. They accomplish more with less because they're aligned with the law rather than fighting against it. Fifth, learn to see everyone and everything as yourself pushed out. This is perhaps the most profound truth in all of existence. There is nothing outside of you. Everyone you meet, every circumstance you encounter, every event that happens, all of it is your own consciousness projected outward and reflected back to you. The world is not happening to you. The world is happening from you. You are not experiencing an external reality. You are experiencing your own consciousness made visible. When you truly understand this, everything changes. You realize that you're never a victim of anyone or anything. That person who treated you rudely, that's your consciousness of that person being reflected back to you. That circumstance that seems to block you, that's your assumption of limitation being reflected back to you. That opportunity that appeared unexpectedly, that's your assumption of good being reflected back to you. Everything without exception is you pushed out. So, when something appears in your world that you don't like, don't waste energy fighting it or blaming external forces. Instead, go within and ask yourself, what assumption have I been holding that created this? And then change the assumption. When someone treats you badly, don't try to change them. Change your assumption about them. When circumstances seem limiting, don't try to overcome them. Change your assumption about your capabilities, because the moment you change your assumption, the moment you change your consciousness, the outer reflection must change. It has no choice. It's not separate from you. It's you. This understanding brings tremendous power and tremendous responsibility. Power, because you realize nothing can happen to you that you haven't first created in consciousness. Responsibility, because you realize you can't blame anyone or anything for your experience. You created it, all of it. But this responsibility is actually liberating because it means you also have the power to uncreate what you don't want and create what you do want. You're not at the mercy of a random, chaotic universe. You're the center of your universe, and everything in it is reflecting your state of consciousness back to you. Sixth, practice living in the wish fulfilled even in small things throughout your day. Don't reserve your assumption. Practice only for your big desires or your nighttime imaginal acts. Practice it constantly with small things. If you're stuck in traffic, assume you're moving freely. If you're about to have a difficult conversation, assume it goes well. If you're facing a challenge, assume you've already overcome it. Make assumption a constant, habit, a way of life, not just a nighttime technique. I'll give you a simple example. Suppose you're looking for a parking space in a crowded lot. Instead of circling around hoping to find one, instead of feeling frustrated that they're all taken, immediately assume you have a perfect parking space. See yourself pulling into it. Feel the satisfaction of finding it right where you need it. And then calmly drive, trusting that your assumption is creating the space. I've done this thousands of times, and I can tell you, the space always appears. Always, because I'm not hoping for it. I'm not wishing for it. I'm assuming it's already there, and my assumption creates it. Apply this principle to everything. Assume your emails bring good news before you open them. Assume your meetings go well before you attend them. Assume your body feels energetic before you rise from bed. Assume abundance before you check your bank balance. Make every moment an opportunity to practice living from the toward end, thinking from the wish fulfilled, and you'll find that your entire life begins to shift because you're no longer creating from lack, from worry, from doubt. You're creating from assumption, from certainty, from the consciousness of already having what you desire. Seventh, understand that time is not your enemy. One of the biggest sources of frustration for people is the apparent delay between assumption and manifestation. They assume on Monday and expect results by Tuesday. And when Tuesday comes and nothing has changed, they feel discouraged. They think the law isn't working. But time is not linear in consciousness. Time is simply the interval between assumption and its manifestation in the three-dimensional world. And this interval serves a purpose. It allows you to build faith. It allows you to prove your faithfulness to your assumption. It allows circumstances and people to arrange themselves in ways that will support your manifestation. Think of time as gestation. When a woman conceives a child, she doesn't expect to give birth the next day. She knows there's a period of gestation. A period when the baby is forming, growing, developing in the invisible realm of the womb. And she doesn't spend that time doubting whether there's really a baby. She knows the baby is there, even though she can't see it yet. She feels the changes in her body. She prepares for the birth. She acts as a pregnant woman acts, and at the right time, the baby emerges. This is exactly how assumption works. When you assume a new state, you've conceived it in consciousness, and there's a period of gestation when it's forming, growing, developing in the invisible realm of consciousness. During this time, you might not see any outer evidence, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Everything is happening. The bridge of incidents is being built, the circumstances are being arranged, the people are being moved, and all of this is happening in the perfect timing of the law. So don't fight time, don't resent it, don't see it as an obstacle. See it as the natural interval between conception and birth, and use that interval wisely. Use it to deepen your assumption. Use it to practice living from the end. Use it to build unshakable faith in the law, and when the time is right, not a moment too soon, not a moment too late, your assumption will manifest in perfect completeness. Eighth, celebrate the manifestations of others. This might seem unrelated to your own practice, but it's actually crucial. When you hear about someone else's success, someone else's manifestation, someone else's good fortune, how do you respond? Do you feel jealous? Do you feel envious? Do you think, why does it work for them and not for me? If so, you're creating resistance to your own manifestations, because when you see someone else's success and you respond with jealousy or envy, you're affirming that success is rare, that there's not enough to go around, that if they have it, you can't have it. And this assumption creates lack in your experience. But when you see someone else's success and you genuinely celebrate it, when you feel joy for them, when you see their manifestation as evidence that the law works, you're actually strengthening your own faith. You're affirming that manifestation is possible, that the law is working, that if it worked for them, it will work for you. So make it a practice to celebrate every manifestation you hear about. When someone tells you good news, rejoice with them genuinely. When you see someone experiencing the very thing you desire, instead of feeling envious, say to yourself, "This is evidence that what I desire is possible. This is the law in action. And what the law did for them, it will do for me." And feel genuine happiness for them, because in the realm of consciousness, there is no competition. There is infinite supply. Someone else's wealth doesn't diminish yours. Someone else's love doesn't diminish yours. Someone else's health doesn't diminish yours. There is enough for everyone, because everyone is creating from the infinite I am. And when you celebrate others, you're actually opening yourself to receiving more, because you're affirming abundance rather than lack. Ninth, learn to discern true desire from conditioned want. Not every desire you have is a true desire of your soul. Some desires are conditioned by society, by media, by family, by ego. These conditioned wants are not rooted in your true self, and trying to manifest them will feel forced, difficult, and ultimately unsatisfying even if you succeed. True desire, on the other hand, comes from your deepest self. It resonates with your soul. It feels right in a way that transcends logic. And when you assume a true desire, the process feels natural, even joyful. So before you commit to assuming a state, ask yourself, is this truly what I want, or is this what I think I should want? Is this coming from my authentic self, or is it coming from conditioning? There's no judgment here. Sometimes what we think we want is just a stepping stone to discovering what we truly want. But the clearer you are about your true desires, the more aligned your assumptions will be with your authentic self, and the more natural and joyful the manifestation process will be. I'll give you an example. A man once told me he was trying to manifest a specific job at a prestigious company. He'd been visualizing it for months with no success, and he was frustrated. I asked him, "Do you really want this job, or do you want what you think this job will give you?" He paused and then admitted, "I want respect. I want recognition. I want to feel successful." And I said, "Then assume those states directly. Assume you're respected. Assume you're recognized. Assume you're successful. Don't tie those states to a specific job. Occupy the states themselves and let the law bring you the circumstances that match those states." He did this, and within a short time, he received an opportunity at a different company that he'd never considered. It wasn't the prestigious job he'd been visualizing, but it brought him everything he truly wanted: respect, recognition, and a deep feeling of success. And he realized that by being too specific about the form his desire should take, he'd been limiting the ways the law could fulfill his true desire. So identify the feeling, the state, the essence of what you want, and assume that. Let the law surprise you with the forms in which it delivers, because the law is far more creative than your conscious mind. It knows paths you can't see. It has access to possibilities you can't imagine. Trust it to deliver your desire in the perfect form, even if that form is different from what you pictured. 10th, and finally, make gratitude your constant companion. I mentioned Thanksgiving earlier, but let me expand on this, because gratitude is one of the most powerful states of consciousness you can occupy. When you live in gratitude, you're automatically assuming abundance. Because you can only be grateful for what you have, not for what you lack. So, gratitude is the feeling of having. And remember, the law responds to the 14-5 feeling of having, not the feeling of wanting. So cultivate gratitude not just for the things you have physically, but for the things you have in consciousness. Be grateful for your assumption of wealth even before the money appears. Be grateful for your assumption of love even before the relationship manifests. Be grateful for your assumption of health even before your body reflects it. This gratitude is not forced or fake. It's the natural response to knowing that what you've assumed in consciousness is already yours. It's already done. And this knowing, this gratitude accelerates the manifestation because you're occupying the state of having rather than the state of wanting. I practice gratitude every single day. Throughout my day, I find things to be grateful for. And I'm not just grateful for the obvious blessings. I'm grateful for the challenges because they strengthen my faith. I'm grateful for the delays because they prepare me for what's coming. I'm grateful for the resistance because it proves that my new assumption is powerful enough to threaten the old. I'm grateful for everything because I know that everything is working together to bring about the fulfillment of my assumptions. So, cultivate this attitude of gratitude. Make it your default state, and you'll find that gratitude itself becomes creative. It attracts more to be grateful for. It opens you to receive. It aligns you with the abundance that is your true nature. Because God, the infinite I Am, is the source of all abundance, all love, all good. And when you're grateful, you're acknowledging and aligning with that source. You're saying yes to the infinite flow of good that is always seeking to express itself through you and as you. Now, as we truly come to the close of this teaching, I want to speak to you heart to heart, soul to soul. Everything I've shared with you tonight is true. I know it's true not because I've read it in books or heard it from others, but because I've lived it. I've proven it in my own experience countless times. I've seen it work in the lives of thousands of people who've applied these principles. This is not theory. This is not speculation. This is not wishful thinking. This is the fundamental law of consciousness, and it works with absolute precision every single time it's properly applied. But knowing the law intellectually is not enough. Reading about it is not enough. Understanding it is not enough. You must apply it. You must live it. You must make it the foundation of your entire approach to life. And this requires something from you. It requires commitment. It requires discipline. It requires faith. Not faith in me or in some external power, but faith in yourself, in your own I Am, in your own creative power. The world will tell you you're powerless. It will tell you you're at the mercy of circumstances, of other people, of fate, of chance. It will tell you that some people are lucky and some people aren't. And there's nothing you can do about which camp you're in. But all of this is a lie. The greatest lie ever told. You are not powerless. You are the power itself. You are the creative principle, the divine imagination, the infinite I am expressing as a human being, and you have been given dominion over your entire world through the power of your assumptions. But with this power comes responsibility. You can no longer blame anyone or anything for your experience. You can no longer play the victim. You can no longer make excuses because now you know. You know that whatever you're experiencing is the result of your own assumptions, your own states of consciousness, your own inner conversations. And if you're experiencing something you don't want, you have the power to change it by changing your assumptions. This might seem like a heavy burden at first, but actually, it's the greatest liberation you'll ever experience, because it means you're never trapped, you're never stuck, you're never at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. Every single moment, you have the power to assume a new state and create a new reality. Every single moment is a fresh opportunity to claim your desire to occupy the wish fulfilled to create the life you want to live. So, I'm asking you now to make a commitment, not to me, but to yourself. Commit to applying this law for the next 30 days. Commit to assuming the state of your wish fulfilled every single night before you fall asleep. Commit to living from that state throughout your day. Commit to revising anything that doesn't match your assumption. Commit to being vigilant about your inner conversations. Commit to persisting regardless of appearances. Commit to proving this law to yourself through your own experience. 30 days. That's all I'm asking. 30 days of faithful, consistent application. And at the end of those 30 days, you will have proven to yourself that this law works. You will have seen evidence of your assumption manifesting in your physical world. And once you've seen it work, even once, your entire relationship with reality will shift. You'll never again feel powerless. You'll never again feel victimized. You'll know with unshakable certainty that you are the creator of your experience. And if you find yourself struggling during those 30 days, if doubt creeps in, if the old state resists, if nothing seems to be happening, come back to this teaching. Listen to it again. Let these truths sink deeper into your consciousness. Remind yourself that consciousness is the only reality, that assumption hardens into fact, that you are the operant power, and then return to your assumption with renewed faith and determination. Because the truth is, you can't fail at this. The only way you can fail is by not trying, by not applying, by not persisting. But if you try, if you apply, if you persist, you must succeed, because you're not hoping the law will work. You're not wishing it will work. You know it works. It's law. It's principle. It's the very structure of reality itself. And law doesn't fail. It can't fail. It operates with mathematical precision every single time. So go now with confidence. Go with certainty. Go with the knowledge that you are far more powerful than you ever imagined. You are not a small, limited, powerless being hoping for God's favor. You are God in human form, creating your world through the power of your imagination, through your assumptions, through your consciousness of being. And what you claim in consciousness, the world must grant you an experience. This is not my law. This is not some special teaching that only a few can access. This is the law of life itself. This is how reality works for everyone, whether they know it or not. The only difference is that now you know it. Now you understand it. Now you can use it consciously, deliberately, powerfully. And that knowledge, that understanding, that power, that's what sets you free. So, I leave you with this final word. Be bold in your assumptions. Don't settle for small desires or timid dreams. You have infinite creative power within you. You have access to every state of consciousness that exists. So, assume greatly, assume nobly, assume the highest, most magnificent state you can. Imagine. And then live from that state with unwavering faith until it becomes your physical reality. You are the infinite I am. You are the creator of your world. You are the law in operation, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible to you. Remember this. Always live from this truth. Create from this power, and watch as your entire world transforms to reflect the God that you are. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. Thank you for opening yourself to these truths. Thank you for being willing to see yourself as the powerful creator you truly are. Now, go and prove it. Go and live it. Go and create the life you were born to live. Not someday, but starting right now in this very moment with the next assumption you make. And if this teaching has touched you, if it's resonated with your soul, if you feel the truth of it stirring within you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. Tell me what you're assuming. Declare your desire fulfilled. Anchor it in your consciousness by speaking it into existence. And as you type those words, feel them becoming more real. Feel the assumption solidifying. Feel the creative power moving to fulfill what you've claimed. And subscribe to this channel so we can continue this journey together. Because what I've shared tonight is just the beginning. There are depths we haven't explored, mysteries we haven't unveiled, powers we haven't awakened, and I want to guide you through all of it, to help you discover the full magnitude of your creative power, to help you become the conscious creator you were always meant to be. But most importantly, don't just listen and move on. Don't just feel inspired and then forget. Apply this, live this, prove this. Make it the foundation of your life. Because this is not just information. This is transformation. This is the key to everything you've ever wanted, everything you've ever dreamed of, everything you've ever longed for in the deepest parts of your soul. And it's all available to you right now in this moment through the simple act of assumption. So assume it now. Whatever your heart desires, assume you already have it. Feel it, live it, be it, and let the law do the rest. Because the law will fulfill itself. It must. That's its nature. That's its promise. And that promise is as certain as the rising of the sun. Until we meet again, may you live in the consciousness of the wish fulfilled. May you know yourself as the infinite I am. And may every assumption you make be fulfilled in ways that exceed your wildest dreams. Go now in power, in peace, and in the absolute certainty that you are the creator of your world. Be still and know that I am. You are the law. You are the power. You are the creator. And your word, your assumption, your consciousness, that is the creative force that shapes your entire reality. Use it wisely. Use it boldly. Use it joyfully. And watch as miracles become your natural way of life. This is the truth. This is the law. This is your power. Now go and live. Thank you.